Have you ever had one of those circumstances where you leave something somewhere, and then when you leave something somewhere, maybe you try to go back for it later and it's not there? Okay. You ever had one of those circumstances where you're wearing something and somebody says those clothes aren't for you? And you're like, what are you talking about? They're my clothes. And they say, no, those clothes aren't for you. And then all of this background starts. And so maybe you're like, well, you know what? I need to take it off. Fuck it. I'll just take it off and dump it. And so you take it off and you leave it. I've seen that happen. It's happened to me. Right? You put something on and then they're like, well, those clothes aren't for you. Those clothes are for someone else. Whoa. You're hearing voices. You must be having a delusion. This is a sign of mental illness. Actually, it's not. Beginning in 2016, I started keeping inventories on things that I got through donations at nonprofits that I would go to while I was trying to get some assistance because I was in a situation that could potentially legally have qualified as homeless. Presumably, you're supposed to be able to get assistance, and hopefully within 3 months, you got your stuff taken care of, you're on the road. I'm a healthy woman, perfectly fit and able. I've got tons of skills. Should have been able to have gotten a job, gotten a little assistance within 3 months, nothing else. I should have at least had a down payment and my first month's rent while I had a job. It's been 6 years now. 6 years, going on 6 years, and I don't know one person that's actually successfully transitioned from a program for the homeless or people that were somehow engaged in or subjected to domestic violence and needed a comparable assistance program because of their experience with domestic violence. In 6 years, I have not met one person that has made a successful transition, especially on their first time. I have not met one person. But what I have met is a lot of people that are supposed to be dealing with mental illness. So what do you mean when you hear these things in the background? I started keeping track of the items that one would get, including the hygiene items. As a matter of fact, in June of 2016, I made a comprehensive inventory of every ingredient in all of the hygiene products one could get when you would go to places that may offer you a shower or offer you hygiene supplies. A lot of these hygiene supplies, at least at that time when I was in Chicago, were what appeared to be donations that were left over from hotels or motels. So a lot of them would have the branding of that hotel or motel. Now, this was happening, and I was, by the way, making these inventories and comparing these data in these inventories around the time that the Department of Justice was releasing a report concerning trafficking of young people in connection with acts of prostitution occurring out of hotels and motels in the San Diego Bay Area. They had received the report much earlier, but for whatever reason, justified sitting on it. Public reports about this report, however, didn't even show up until around September or October. So far as I could see, I couldn't find any public reports or press conferences discussing the release of the information in this report, despite the fact that my understanding was by March of 2016, the Department of Justice had received it. And on the report itself, it identified that they had accepted it and received it by early April of 2016. Wasn't released until July. But middle to end of June, I'm doing these inventories. One of the things I'm comparing is the ingredients in all of the hygiene products, proportions of the ingredients in all of the hygiene products. But I also did inventories of the apparel, the clothes, places of origin, brands. You know, if you're homeless and you go to one of these donation stores, different homeless people have different tastes, of course. Sometimes some people will donate very nice stuff. My understanding is when you get one of these donations, you're hoping that whoever donated it had good intention. Sometimes you can tell. They're hoping you get that suit. They're hoping you get those slacks. They're hoping you get that coat. And then you get that job interview. Then you get that job. Then you move on. But after 6 years, that's not how I see it, right? That's not how I see donations. What I see is a lack of receipt. You ever gone to a donation center as a homeless person or a person in need of services and ask them for a receipt when you get those clothing? I've done it before. They won't give it to me. They will not let me know what the actual value of the item they're donating to me is, insofar as they assessed it as having a value that was allowed to be attributed to the donor. This is something that I've actually been very conscientious of. Why? Well, it's not just because of the 1996 Anti-Terrorist and Effective Death Penalty and the fact that the primary application of said law has to do with allegations of laundering money through charities to finance acts of terrorism. It's also because each of those donations has a value. If you donate to an organization, you take your stuff to an organization, they are by law required to give you a receipt for what they consider to be the value of those items. You take those receipts and you can use them as deductions from your taxes. This is a big deal I've been thinking about. These donation boxes. Well, there's no chain of evidence. You go, you take some items. You've assessed them a value yourself. You've identified that you've donated them. Then you go drop them off to a donation box. But there is no confirmation of receipt by the organization, and there is no confirmation of the value of that donation. The value that organization would assess it at when it's accounting for contributions and donations made to the organization. See, somebody that used to be in a situation where such things should have been of concern to me, I didn't know these basic things. It would have behooved somebody to give me very basic information. You got some donations. We've already gone through. We've got lists of what these items are valued at, these items are valued at when we get these donations, when we accept these donations. We are accepting a contribution to our organization of this amount. We let people know, we give them a receipt. We can match those receipts so far as there might be an audit. But what it says is our organization has value because people consider our organization and our efforts valuable enough to contribute these items to our cause. So we want them to be acknowledged, and we want the people who get them to be acknowledged. You're coming through here because you have a need, but we got people that support us because they understand people like you have value. And so when they contribute to us, they're really contributing to you. They don't do that. And so what ends up happening? Well, year after year after year, month after month after month. And there's these intangibles associated with the actual visit. The expectations that you have, but also the expectations that the other people have. The unvoiced. The nonverbal efforts to try to compel performance of a contract that has not been disclosed is how I understand it. And I bring this up because this is very important. Because a lot of times, somebody else has assessed a value to that item of clothing that you've obtained. And with all the surveillance, who's to say who has access to what? I'm wearing a coat right now. It's a great coat. I didn't get it through a donation center. I got it, this specific coat, which, by the way, I've had now for more than 9 months. Actually, this is probably the 9th month. Somebody dumped the coat. And I believe that when I saw them, they were going through a period where somebody was chastising them. They were chastising them about what they were wearing. See, I had gone through this myself. This thing where you put something on, they say, that's not yours. That's not for you. That's not for you. And then this person got up from where they were, and they went outside, and they took the coat, and they threw the coat. They put the coat on the handle of the door. They put the coat on the handle of the door after they left. Now, this was kind of triggering to me because I had done something similar with a tie I had purchased myself in a course of quitting a job at what later turned out to be a very, very important time politically, not just for me, but also, I believe now, in the history of the United States. See, the day I quit my job, somebody else announced they were quitting theirs. And so when I saw him, he left the coat. I didn't know that he left the coat until after he was far gone. I took the coat. I put it away in storage. I haven't touched it since then. I've kept it safe. Well, now it's cold. I'm wearing the coat. It's a nice coat. It's a very nice coat. I don't know where he got it. But people like him have value. And I don't just mean monetary value that somebody assesses when they put you on the street and they run you around and they subject you to all this torment. I have a feeling that they're doing something I've been watching them do the whole last year. Every quarter. As a matter of fact, I found the specific treasury note I understand it's pegged to. If I'm not mistaken, it's a 2-year note, and it has payments on a quarterly basis. It pays out on a quarterly basis. Every fucking quarter for the last year, including the most recent one. They've got a specific round in Dallas. I've been talking about this. They've manifested. First, what you see is a bunch of women that look light-skinned, white-skinned. Usually they have blonde hair. Maybe 30 to 45, maybe 30 to 50 years old. And they disappear in a cluster. And you see them maybe a couple of days very prominently in places like downtown. I haven't been going to the shelters and the service providers, so I don't know what it looks like if and when they show up there. They're visible probably for about 10 days to 2 weeks. Then most of them are gone. But then right after that, you see a round of what appear to be young African-American men. I would say older than high school age, but not maybe old enough to vote. To run for Congress. Somewhere between maybe 18 and 25, 24, 18 and 24. I think that there's a specific age cutoff where they're of legal age, but they're not in a situation where they would qualify to do something like represent themselves at the level I understand they're being used as an asset, for instance. And they show up and they're ready for something. They're ready for something. And there's a lot of salaciousness in the background. But at least in my experience so far, when you approach them, they're actually very nice people. And regardless of what's going on at the beginning, well, you don't really see them around so much either, right? They're there for a while. It looks like they know what they're doing. They're right on time. They're sharp. They're that good. But then you don't see them around. But then after them, there is another round, which is white-appearing men. I don't know if they're actually white demographically. The first 3 issues, most of them have been young men around the same age as the other group of young men and a little older, under 30. Under 30, but at an age threshold. That would have been the transition from those young African-American men. But this time it's different. There's kind of a mix now. I'm seeing the young men, but I'm also seeing older men in a way that I haven't before. The older men usually appear at a different stage in this pattern, but they're being mixed in with the young men this time. And they've done something. I saw it. I saw it 3 days ago. They're doing that 2-in-1. They're doing that 2-in-1. 1 woman, 2 men. I've seen it several times. Now, when I saw it, it had a certain impact. There was a certain demographic representation. There was a certain age threshold. It wasn't supposed to happen. Something else was supposed to happen. But somebody inserted that 2-in-1, and I've been seeing it appear. I'm concerned because that 2-year Treasury note just hit its last payout. But my concern is that what happened is somebody either didn't get what they expected out of it, or because nobody actually fucking prosecuted it for what it is, somebody decided they were going to re-up it, and they were going to alter the scheme a bit. They're going to use this round that they've just finished, and they're going to try to pivot it. And I'm concerned that the mix of the young men with the older men is part of what the scheme was actually about. That those older men are there as some sort of placeholder for the demographic. Because ultimately, all of that is supposed to deposit to that demographic. This is unacceptable. If somebody tried to say to you that you could spend some time on the streets, maybe earn your stripes, maybe you get a stock issue. Let me ask you something. I've been watching this for a year. Did you actually get it? Or did they try to send you to another city and tell you to do it again? How many of those women are still alive? How many of the original batch of Stettelhose from last year are still alive? What about the second batch from early 2022? What about the next batch from April? What about the half batch you did in July? How many of those women you just fucking put on the street are expected to be alive by the end of the fucking year? Where do those young men go? The black ones and the white ones. Where do they go? How many of them have jobs right now? How many of them have homes? Leases in their own name. Let me ask you another question. How many of them have gotten high in the last 72 hours? How many of them are high right fucking now? How dare anybody think that in the context of what has been going on, at whatever level you think you're entitled to say you actually operate at, how did you allow for the last year to be squandered on what I understand this election portends? Are there really referendums in state for the legalization of recreational marijuana? How many people were you willing to force onto the streets as part of a completely illegal and unconscionable scheme to launder money at some of the highest levels so that you could get legal recreational marijuana? How is legal recreational marijuana going to get those people that were strategically targeted to be put into a situation of homeless for somebody else's finance scheme? How is it going to get them what they need? Are you going to provide them with mental health care? Are you going to give them counseling and casework? Are you going to give them access to Medicare benefits so they can get medicinal marijuana in order to help with what? Their trauma? How many of them have glaucoma? Unfortunately, the last year on the street, well, you all haven't been producing anything close to the kind of documentation somebody would need to even understand all the jobs you have, presumably providing for the homeless, providing for the poor, providing for the mentally ill. All of those jobs that we were supposed to be concerned about, including jobs that somebody wants to say are part of COVID-19, right? The front line of COVID-19. How many articles were there about people experiencing trauma because of COVID-19? Let me ask you another question. How many articles were there about people having increased dependence on drugs, including hard drugs, including drugs like methamphetamine or stimulants or even cocaine, in the course of their work in the response to COVID-19? See, there weren't so many of those articles, were they? How many people expecting to get paid and acknowledged as a first responder in COVID-19 are doing drugs right now that are actually illegal for them to do? How many of them are getting illegal prescription medications and consuming them for themselves? And how many of them are expecting to use whatever compensation we're expected to provide for you in your work to get legal marijuana? Why don't we have homes? Why are we not in our own damn place right now? Are you going to come out on the street and smoke crack with us? Would it be a breach of professional ethics for you to smoke your marijuana with us on the streets, up to and including if we were deemed to have a mental illness and one of your colleagues was treating us? Are you going to smoke pot with us on the street? Are you going to do CBD oil with us on the street? See, we're not on the street getting CBD oil, but you are in your homes getting CBD oil, aren't you? This is the fourth quarter where you allowed everything I did to be trashed with the most obscene, completely contemptible background. I've spent an entire year with a political economy that says the only thing I can do to pay is to engage in acts of prostitution and drug abuse. And if I don't do it on a daily basis, I have to listen to people talk about how I didn't pay. So whatever I did throughout that day is supposed to be attributed to other people, including people that claim they were elected to political office. Do you smoke pot with them? Once recreational marijuana is legalized, are you going to go smoke pot with them, and are you going to try to make us pay for it? Have you already smoked pot with them? And as a result of smoking pot with them, they've agreed to support you in changing the law and covering up for what you did to make the rest of us pay for your drug habit. We've got a big problem with addiction. Parents are addicted to drugs, including electronic drugs, and so they're drugging their children. And that's why we don't talk about and we don't address the actual problem we have with drug abuse in this country. And it is not acceptable that I've had to spend a year on the street, not only myself being subjected to what I was subjected to, but having to watch on a quarterly basis as you just distribute people on the street for liquidation. See, I already know that when they do those drugs, they have a higher likelihood of dying because you make a justification for leveraging them. The people in the nonprofits, the people in the bureaucratic positions at City Hall already said we don't toe the political line, so we don't have any political rights. So what you do is you back in code us with whatever you call your work, which isn't produced in a public forum. You don't provide political critique in a commensurate with what we provide you with in terms of addressing your work politically, including what you want to call a job. And we're not allowed to have jobs ourselves. And you deploy us to the street so that law enforcement can gamble on who and what is going to make the quota that ultimately circulates within the pension system that you're expecting to get paid with when you retire. Right? So you can't make an excuse. This whole process where somehow we're supposed to identify and look at law enforcement as being our enemy. Well, the truth of the matter is the reason they're our enemy is because you are. Why did you put yourself in a position where you engaged in adversarial relationship with the people you were supposed to serve? Were we worth it? Did you get enough drugs yet? If you legalize recreational marijuana in Arkansas, are we finally going to have paid our debt for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign? If they legalize recreational marijuana in Arkansas, can I finally get off the fucking streets without having to engage in active prostitution? It's been years. Nobody's seen fit to actually fucking arrest me because I haven't broken the law. Will you stop libeling me? If you can cajole, convince, or even manipulate the figures in Arkansas to pass a recreational legalized marijuana bill, will you finally have considered whatever my debt was to you because I didn't support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign to have been paid? I need you to understand, this has been going on since before I was of the age of legal consent. It's been going on since before I even produced sex hormones. You told me I owed for 40 fucking years of somebody else's political ambition. And apparently the point at the end of the day was to legalize recreational drug use, except that's not actually the point. It's the recreational drug use legalization paid for by the government. And you didn't want to acknowledge who the people were that would have been in that government with you. I don't understand. You all were supposed to have put the women who were already on the streets in their own homes by today. You didn't do that. You sent another group of people out to the streets to hustle up whatever it takes to pay for your fucking drugs. This is the last time you're going to be able to get away with this. This is the last time you do this.